nationally televised address from the leader, causing concern from Berlin all the way to Washington these days. Vladimir Putin. Some of the headlines: standing firm on Russian interests abroad, and a call for better ties with the U.S. We'll see a little bit more what the subtext of that was. First, more from Emily Young.
It was the same no-nonsense Putin delivering his State of the Union, sending a message straight to President-elect Donald Trump.
Cooperation between Russia and the U.S. in solving global and regional issues is in the interests of the whole world. We have a shared responsibility to ensure international security and stability, to strengthen regimes of non-proliferation of weapons. We don't want confrontation with anyone, not us, not our partners, nor the world community needed. We are not searching and have never searched for enemies. We need friends, but we will not allow anyone to infringe upon or ignore our interests.
The president delivered his State of the Union speech for the 13th time since becoming president in 2000, speaking to both houses of parliament, state officials, and the world. His hope that the incoming U.S. administration will be a conduit to a U.S. partnership crystallized. He also addressed the conflict in Syria.
We count on uniting our efforts with the United States to fight real and not a made-up threat, which is international terrorism. It is exactly this goal that our servicemen are trying to achieve in Syria. Terrorists suffered significant damage. The Russian Army and Navy have convincingly demonstrated that they are able to work effectively far away from their permanent deployment bases.
His agenda included other remarks regarding social and economic challenges, as the Russian economy has faced significant struggles this past year. But his speech leaves a resounding echo. Putin sees a friend in President-elect Trump, and all signs from the West seem to imply that he indeed has found one.
We'll get a few different perspectives on Vladimir Putin. His words today. Expert on Russian national security, Simon Tsipis, joining me here in the studio. Good to have you back, Simon. And joining us in London, former Kremlin advisor Alexander Nekrasov. Good evening, Alexander.
Good evening.
So we talk a lot about Vladimir Putin, what might be on his mind. Today we heard a little bit of it from him directly. What was your take?
Well, I thought it was a bit of an anticlimax, to be honest, because I thought that, he tried to be quiet on many issues, and he didn't really challenge the West or, any other countries, because I think he's waiting for Donald Trump to become president in America, and I think there was sort of a, friendly overtures rather than the usual, blaming the West for everything.
Simon?
So, and as regards his economic and social agenda, which was probably 90% of the speech, I didn't find myself anything exciting in it at all. I don't really see what the government in Moscow is planning to do with the economy. The only warning I might give to your viewers in Israel who have any business in Russia is that taxes in Russia will go up. Personal, private taxes, personal, individual, and corporate. So they better beware.
On that tax note, stay with us, Alexander. Simon, what was your take? Underwhelming?
Well, he looked really confident, and he almost did not read from his speech papers. He thanked Russian and air and naval forces that are engaged in Syria. One important sentence that he said in the end of this, that he said, "We will continue this work." That might mean that Russia came to Middle East to stay for a long time. He also twice said that Russia will not tolerate any disregard from other states toward Russia. He even used the word rigidly. He said that Russia will rigidly react to all kind of unjust and aggressive attitude towards Russia. Well, only Putin knows what did that mean. He stressed artificial revolution and regime change around the world, and he even connected it. He did not support it. He thinks that this is artificial revolution and regime changes. He even connected it with the Europe refugee crisis. He said that it all will lead to a chaos. This is what, in my opinion, were his main points.
Alexander, when you hear, as Simon says, Vladimir Putin referencing this will go on for a long time, do you expect Putin to have a firm presence here in the Middle East for many, many years to come?
Well, at the moment it looks like it, but I think things will be changing after we see Trump in the White House and other movements as well. Because, you know, in Europe we're anticipating major changes, political changes. So the political map of the world is in this transition period.
And by that you mean Donald Trump more than anything else, I think.
Well, not only that, in Europe we're seeing quite, drastic changes, starting with Brexit. There's also, elections in France and in Austria and the referendum in Italy. So the political map is changing. So, and what he's saying now might change next year, maybe in the middle or by the end of it. But what I found quite unusual about his speech is that he didn't really touch on the corruption and sort of played it down and even told the Russian media not to make a big fuss out of it, when we basically are watching a serious political crisis happening with one of the top key ministers in the cabinet arrested for bribery. You don't really say, when you have that sort of situation, that the press should not make a big thing out of corruption.
Well, I guess he's trying to turn focus elsewhere on that. Alexander Nekrasov, thanks very much for weighing in. As always, Alexander Nekrasov in London. And one country sure to be watching that speech, of course, closely is Ukraine, still locked in confrontation with Vladimir Putin. Kiev answered to that today, a show of force, a barrage of missile tests, and a first ever for that country. The 2 days of war games include military drones, missile systems, air defense. Simon, when we see Ukraine carrying out that kind of drill, the first of its kind, next to Vladimir Putin and his speech, how worried should Ukraine be?
Well, in my opinion, this is a provocative move because for two reasons. First, there are a lot of other airspace territories to conduct such a large military exercise. Why do it above Crimea? Crimea has more than 2.5 million citizens. Usually military does
To send a message, surely.
Yes, of course. I think Ukraine looks for a provocation to provoke Russia to act, maybe even military. And the second reason, why do exercise right now when you engaged in a major conflict with the Donbass region? So for me,
if Ukraine is trying to spark something, do you think that Kiev really is prepared to enter into a confrontation with Russia? That didn't go very well last time.
no, Kiev definitely not ready to confront, to go into a large-scale conflict with Russia. But in my opinion, the call was not from Petro Poroshenko. It was from abroad, the ocean.
Somebody else asking them to
in my opinion, yes.
Reinforcing that. Do you think that Russia's so focused on the Middle East that maybe the focus is turning away a little bit from Ukraine, or is this going to be an issue we see many, many years into the future?
I think such country as Russia is able to manage two conflicts in parallel, one in Syria and one in Ukraine. But I hope that there will be no conflict, major conflict again in Ukraine. So I think in next year we'll see Russia concentrated only in Syrian conflict.
When we see a little bit of the economic situation, not a good one, when Alexander, as you just mentioned, corruption going on inside Russia, how much does that affect Russia's ability to wage all of these conflicts? I mean, we're seeing heavy military involvement and economic problems back home.
The fact that Putin, in his 1 hour and 15 minutes speech, talked most of the time about economic and social and corruption problem, I think it might give us a conclusion that Russia actually facing some social and economic problems, part of which might be because of these sanctions that the West posed on Russia.
So let's zoom a little bit in on Kiev and ask that question to Natalie Grivniak. She's joining us from Kiev. Good evening, Natalie.
Hi, good evening.
So maybe you can help us answer this question. For this military drill, the first of its kind, why now for Ukraine?
Well, we consistently need to check our military capacities, and as today our President Poroshenko has just stated that we didn't have any air missile weapons whatsoever for 24 years, and right now there is a need to be ready.
Looks like maybe we lost Natalie's sound for a moment. So Simon, if we just sort of wrap up looking forward, you say Russia's going to continue to focus on the Middle East. Do you think that that is going to be a hot zone that the United States is going to have to get involved in if we're looking at Ukraine and Russia?
Well, everybody, of course, hoping that this major Syrian conflict will end maybe next year. But I think, in my opinion, Russia would concentrate still on Middle East affairs. Definitely, it will also won't leave this Ukrainian conflict because there is something has to be done about these southeast areas, which are now engaged in some kind of conflict inside the Ukraine. So I think these are the two major regions for Putin to be activated in next year.
Vladimir Putin has his work cut out for him. Simon Tsipis, thanks very much for being here. And just as we heard a moment ago from Alexander Nekrasov, the political map is changing. Putin is watching it too. And coming up on Sunday, 2 European governments will be part of that in 2 major votes. For Italy, it's constitutional reform. And if voters reject it, Prime Minister Matteo Renzi could resign. For Austria, though, the stakes are even higher. That vote could end with the European Union's first ever far-right head of state. Foreign Affairs correspondent Owen Alterman breaks down just how Europe might look next week.
A big day for Europe. On Sunday, voters go to the polls in Austria and Italy in the latest test for Europe. In Austria, an election with the now usual clash, the political establishment against a far-right populace. And in Italy, a referendum on the constitution that could be something much bigger. First to Austria, a rerun to elect the country's president. Far-right leader Norbert Hofer and Alexander Van der Bellen battled last spring. Van der Bellen won narrowly, but Hofer won his challenge in court. Now, the two meet again, and it's expected to be a close race.
Whenever the elites distance themselves